Hi you guys, welcome back to the channel. This video is so overdue. I'm finally getting around to filming this. I have Addie here right beside me. She's now 8 weeks old today. So it has been a long time, or feels like a long time since I've had her. And I'm finally getting around to talking about my birth story. Honestly, this birth was my hardest. And because of that, that does play a factor in the reason why I don't want any more kids. I had a really hard pregnancy, a really hard labor, a really hard birth, a hard recovery. You know, I'm just kind of done with that phase of my life. In our birth vlog, which we posted obviously a long time ago, I didn't add in all of the details of the awful things that were happening and the scary things that were happening because I wanted her birth vlog to be focused on like the joy and happiness that we had giving birth to her. Obviously, this is gonna go more into detail about what actually happened and the things that I didn't say and didn't want to share at the time because I was worried of people being like, well, that's why you don't get induced, you know? And I just wasn't prepared for those comments. But I will say that I will, if I ever get pregnant again, which that is not the plan, I will never be induced again. It was my first time being induced and it was awful. I don't have like any concept of time really. I don't have any specific times where I'm like, oh, at 9 o'clock this happened. I just have kind of rough estimates of when everything happened. I'm going to try my best to kind of give a timeline of everything. To kind of go back in time on this, I chose to be induced because my parents were gonna go out of town. My due date was February 21st and the date that I had for my induction was February 15th. So on February 14th, which is Valentine's Day, we dropped my older two daughters off at my mom's house so they would stay the night there. That night, Ben and I just kind of hung out and I was very anxious. I couldn't eat all day long. I was so nervous going into this. I think I'm just gonna hold her because she is just... So I was very nervous going into this induction. I really didn't know what to expect because I've never been induced before. The morning of the 15th comes and they call me and say that they don't have any room in the hospital to take me because I was an elective induction. Now if I went into labor spontaneously, I would have been able to go to the hospital, but they just didn't want to use up the rooms that were still available for an elective induction just in case other women came in active labor, if that makes sense. Long story short, that day we waited all day long. They ended up canceling my induction and said that they would potentially move it to the next day. They didn't know if I was going to be able to get in. And so I was completely devastated. Obviously, I'd been working myself up to go in and have a baby that day. So the next morning came, they actually told me they had no room again and then called me back about 30-45 minutes later, I'm pretty sure, and said, hey, we have a room for you. When can you get here? And I was like, oh my God, I can come right now. We just kind of threw our stuff in the bag, like everything that we needed to grab last minute, like chargers and the computer and all of that stuff. We get to the hospital, we get all checked in. I obviously was not in labor at the time, and previously when I had gotten checked my last time, I was about a 2.5 and I was 50% effaced. So I was hoping at this point that I'd be like a 3 or 4 because it had been almost a week since I had been to my doctor. Everything's really kind of a blur, but I was having a few Braxton Hicks contractions, nothing that was painful at all. My nurse was the best nurse ever. She got me all hooked up and actually couldn't find the vein in my arm, so she had to put lidocaine in my arm, which is numbing medicine, because she said she needed to like move the needle around and she didn't want me to be in pain. So we did that, signed so much paperwork. We had somebody from the nursery come in and ask what kind of vaccines and stuff they wanted to give and just everything that I wanted after she was here, and asking me all these questions about my pregnancy. When it comes to my pregnancy, she was, I want to say like borderline growth restricted, because they would consider her growth restricted if she was in the 10th percentile or less, and she was at the 12th percentile a week before she was born. Just telling them all of that and how I had multiple ultrasounds, so many non-stress tests, just like checking up on her. They start the Pitocin an hour after I had fluid, I'm pretty sure. After they hooked me up to an IV, then they started the Pitocin. So they started me, it goes up in like 2 increments at a time. So it starts at a 2 and then you go to a 4 and then a 6 and then an 8, you get it. I started at a 2. I don't really think it did anything. She was in and out of the room for a few hours. I want to say it was about 9 or 10 o'clock at this point that I got started on Pitocin. So then she checked me and I was still a 2.5, 50% effaced. Nothing had happened. And she kept asking me like I could have my epidural at any time if I wanted an epidural. I told her that I was going to end up wanting an epidural, so she was just like, do you want an epidural now? Do you want an epidural now? And I was like, no, I kind of want to wait until I feel something, because I was very scared to get the epidural. And if you guys have been along with my journey, I had a terrible experience with my past epidural. I had a lumbar puncture, which means they went in too far with the epidural needle and I started to leak spinal fluid. I had a horrible headache. It was a horrible experience. So I was very scared going into this. I was more scared for the epidural than I was like to push her out or to feel contractions or anything. I'm gonna keep like interrupting myself because I have so many thoughts, and as I'm telling the story I'm like remembering things. I did want to say that at my last ultrasound before I had her, she was face up, so sunny side up. I don't OP, or I think I heard my doctor say. So she was not facing down as far as I knew. This is all I remembered. I was like, I'm pretty sure she's face up, but the doctor couldn't tell until I was more dilated to feel like the suturing in her skull or something that would kind of tell the position that she was in. But I just remember going into this thinking that she was face up. Keep moving forward. We're on Pitocin. Ben and I were just watching movies. I was feeling kind of strong contractions. I did my makeup. I was calling my mom and just checking up and giving everyone updates. Like I said, the nurse kept coming in like, hey, do you want an epidural? I guess the anesthesiologist had a bunch of people in labor and constantly had epidurals kind of backed up, had a bunch of C-sections. So she kept coming in and telling me, just want to let you know at 10:30 or at 11 or 11:30, whatever the time was, the anesthesiologist has a C-section and he has 3 epidurals after that. So I just want to let you know, if you want to get your epidural right now, you can go ahead and get it. And each time I would kind of turn it down because, like I said, I wanted to kind of feel something before I had the epidural because I was so scared. I would rather focus on the pain of the contractions than the pain of the epidural that I was feeling. I just kept laboring on my own. Nothing was really happening. I started to feel a little bit of pressure. Ultimately, my doctor came in. Ben brought me a new battery. Thanks, Ben. My doctor came in, checked me again. I was only at a 3 at this point. She broke my water and said that after my water breaks, I'd probably feel a lot more contractions. And I still didn't have an epidural at this point, so I was really curious to feel what it felt like to have your water broken without an epidural. And it was the weirdest thing I've ever felt in my life. It's like you're peeing yourself and you have no control over how much is coming out or when. Like, it is the most ridiculous feeling I've ever felt in my life. Maybe she broke my water earlier, and then at about 12:30 I was like, okay, I think I'm ready for an epidural. My contractions were not as painful as natural contractions were when I like spontaneously went into labor with both my other girls at all. And the Pitocin was at a 16 when I got my epidural. I did not find the Pitocin contractions to be more painful than natural and normal contractions. So it might have just been because I was only at a 4, but I don't know. And I say that I was at a 4 because she checked me when I got my epidural and I was only at a 4. Anyway, got the anesthesiologist in there. I was unbelievably terrified and I was telling the guy about it as he was giving it to me. This anesthesiologist was amazing. I don't think epidurals are comfortable in the slightest anyway, so, but everything went fine. It was, you know, like a normal epidural experience. If I'm rocking back and forth, it's just because I'm holding her. But she set me up in bed and, you know, got all the pillows and everything that I needed all situated. And I decided I was just gonna take a nap because, rightfully so, I had not been sleeping the few nights before that, just preparing for this and being so anxious about it. From like 1 to 2, I laid down and took a nap. And apparently during that time, my nurse came in quite a few times because her heart rate was dropping. I really think that it was because of the Pitocin. I hear so many stories of women who go through the same thing and end up in emergency C-sections because the Pitocin is so strong and so not natural for your body that it just stresses the baby out and their heart rate starts dropping. Addie's heart rate would drop to like 80 and then spike right back up to 160 after the contraction was over. She was like stressing out in there. At first, she repositioned me to see if that would help with the way that Addie was responding to the contractions. It was getting worse, and so then she bumped down my Pitocin. It was still the same. It continued to be the same way until she came out. It was very scary, and I think the only reason why I did not go in for an emergency C-section is because I dilated so fast. When I got the epidural, she checked me, she put a catheter in me. Like when she was getting me all situated, she checked me and I was a 4 at that point. That's when I napped and just kind of laid down and relaxed, and that's when her heart rate was dropping. We were trying to figure out how to get it all balanced out. And again, we weren't filming any of this because I was scared that somebody would be like, oh, this is what you get for, or this is what happens when you have an elective induction. I had no idea, but after the experience and hearing other people's stories, I'm like, oh my gosh, I will never get induced again. I just won't do it. After I laid down from about 1 to 2, she checked me again and I was a 6. 6, or maybe it was like at 3 o'clock or so. She checked me and I was a 6. This is where everything kind of goes crazy. I started to really panic. I started to cry, like uncontrollably cry. I was feeling very anxious, like I was having a panic attack. My heart rate was pounding. I instantly was just feeling like everything was happening so quick. I've never felt that way before. It was very overwhelming and I couldn't really wrap my mind around what was going on, and it just came on all of the sudden. I was completely fine and then I was not. I was crying. I was panicking. We called the nurse in because I was going to ask her for anxiety medication or something that they could give me to calm me down because I was panicking. Literally panicking. I didn't know why I was feeling that way because it came on all of a sudden. It was very scary. So she comes in and she's like, what's going on? And I was like, I really don't know, but I think I'm about to start crying again. And my nurse was amazing. She was like, it's okay to cry. Please tell me like how I can help you. What is going on? Tell me how you're feeling. And I just started crying so hard. I was like, I don't know what's going on. I feel so overwhelmed. I'm so anxious. I feel like I'm about to have a panic attack. She's like, well, let's check you because you might be transitioning. And she checks me. She goes, oh, yep, you're an 8. And this was 15 minutes after she told me that I was a 6. I was like, oh my gosh, I know that women go from an 8 to a 10 within minutes. So I started panicking even more. And she goes, you're doing great. You're at an 8. You're just transitioning. Let me know if you feel like any pressure or anything. So she sits me up more straight because just to get me to get more air in my lungs and just to kind of calm down, sit up instead of laying back and just feeling heaviness on my chest. As soon as she sits me up, she walks out of the room, and I think we got this on camera. Ben was kind of filming what was going on and I'm like, I feel a baby head, call her in. Like I feel her coming out of me. And this is with an epidural. I felt so much pressure. This is right after she stepped out of the room. So in like 15 minutes, I went from a 6 to a 10. And before that, I went from a 4 to a 10 in less than 2 hours. She comes in. She checks me again. She's like, oh, yep, you're a 10. I'm like, oh my God, no, like I'm not ready for this. Like, this is so scary. So she lays me back and we start doing the practice pushes. She can feel at this point that Addie is sunny side up. Her face, and what that means is babies are supposed to come out of you head down, facing the floor, like this. And Addie was facing up, facing the ceiling. This was probably the hardest thing that I've ever done, is pushing this kid out. Oh my gosh, it was so hard. With Avery, I pushed 2-3 times. She came right out. I was really thinking that this labor and delivery was going to be so much easier than that. It's to delete some footage again, but I was practice pushing and practice pushing and practice pushing and practice pushing. It just kept going, and I was like, okay, like last time I practiced pushing, they were like, oh wait, baby's coming out, like let's wait for the doctor, stop pushing. And then I pushed and she came out. Like that's how it was. No, I had gone through about 10 rounds, 10 contractions of pushing 3 times each time, and nothing was happening. And she's like, yeah, baby's still pretty far up there, I can kind of see her. I'm like, what in the world is going on? Am I not pushing correctly? It was just me, my nurse, and Ben in the room, and I am just pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing. And she ended up taking my vitals again and realized that I had spiked a fever, which resulted in me staying in the hospital for 48 hours after she was born because I needed antibiotics. But I think Addie was kind of stressing out. Again, this entire time, every single contraction, her heart rate has been dipping to about 80, spiking back up to about 160. And so they put me on oxygen. In between pushes, I was on oxygen, and then I could take it off when I was pushing. So I pushed for an hour and a half with my nurse. Practice pushing, you guys. Practice pushing for an hour and a half. This is my 3rd baby. Like, I know how to do this, and it was all because of the way that she was positioned. She was in such a horrible position that I couldn't get her out. I keep pushing, I'm on oxygen, and you can see it in my eyes. Ben said every time I stopped pushing, my eyes would close and I just looked so defeated and so exhausted. I was so tired and just felt like I couldn't do it. I didn't have much strength left in me. Honestly, I was so tired from pushing for so long. Finally, my doctor came in and she was trying to manually flip her around and have her head down. So whenever I would push, My doctor would stick her hand in and literally I would feel her go like this to the top of her head. It didn't hurt because I had the epidural, but it definitely was not like the most comfortable feeling because she was grabbing my baby's head inside me. So I'm sure she's like at least this far into me trying to turn my baby's head. That did not work. She tried a few times and she was like, baby's not turning. I was just gonna have to deliver her face up. I think I had to get to a certain point before they called the doctor in, so I finally got her down into the birth canal and pushed probably for about 15 to 20 more minutes. Just less than 2 hours of pushing. Finally, she was born. And she was my smallest baby. She was 6 pounds 9 ounces. I would describe my second birth as magical. It was in the morning time. She was born at 9 a.m. I got the epidural. I was sleeping the entire time, woke up at 10 centimeters, pushed her out in 2-3 pushes, and it was just like the most magical thing ever. This was far from magical. It was very stressful with her heart rate dropping, with me not being able to push her out. I was exhausted from pushing so hard, trying to get her out of me. And this is all stuff that, like I said, I didn't want to necessarily show in the birth vlog because it was very scary. I really think that if I would have labored, if I didn't dilate from a 4 to a 10 within just less than 2 hours, and I kept laboring with the way that her heart rate was dipping, I really truly believe that I would have been taken for an emergency C-section if I wasn't dilating and her heart rate kept dipping and she just went into like distress. So I am thankful that I did dilate so fast, but she did not come out fast. Like, I pushed for as long as I dilated from a 4 to a 10. I pushed the same amount of time. And immediately after I had her, my fever broke and I didn't need oxygen anymore. After she was born, it was pretty normal. She was very healthy, our healthiest baby. She did not have one slight bit of jaundice. She came out crying. Like, she was very healthy herself. My other babies were around 7.5 and 8 pounds pretty much, and she was 6 pounds 9 ounces, which made sense because she was in the 12th percentile just before I had her. And I delivered her at 39 weeks and 2 days. I also delivered my second baby at 39 weeks and 2 days, and she was 7 pounds 7 ounces. It all makes sense. If she would have come out at 7 pounds 14 ounces, I would have been like, what? Why is she that big? Because they told me my entire pregnancy that she was too small. They moved me up to the mom baby department, and they did not take my IV out because I had to have antibiotics for 24, I don't even remember how long I had to have antibiotics for before they would let me go. But we spent 2 nights in the hospital. The only reason why we stayed 2 nights is because I needed antibiotics, not because anything was wrong with her. They were honestly more concerned about me and more focused on my health. And I needed these antibiotics every 2 hours, 2 or 3 hours I needed antibiotics. So I couldn't get really any good sleep because my nurses would come in and switch out my medication. They would put me on antibiotics for, I think it was every 3 hours I needed antibiotics, but they would run for an hour, so I would have like a 2-hour break in between. That's the birth story. That's everything that you guys did not see. I'm glad that we didn't put all of that in because the mood in the room was not very excited while I was pushing. It was very like, okay, we need to push, we need to get her out. Like, she's very stressed, we need to get her out. From the moment I was 6 centimeters to the time that she was delivered, it was chaos. And I know that I chose to be induced, so some of that probably would not have happened if I just let my body naturally go into labor. Hopefully that made sense because I'm very sleep deprived, and I don't know if any of this is going to make sense when I edit it because it was 8 weeks ago as well. So I'm probably leaving some details out. Anyway, that is it. That is the story. She's healthy. She is happy. She's on the floor right here with me while I'm filming this. And I am good now. I have no residual. Oh, I'm sure everyone's going to wonder if I tore. Because I always wonder if people tear. Is that weird? I want to know. I want to know if you tore and if you got stitches. Fortunately, I did not tear and I did not need any stitches. So I healed very quickly. The only residual effect that I have to this day for 8 weeks now is just exhaustion. I'm just so tired. And it will go away and it will pass. It's just, we're in the thick of it right now. 8 weeks old. It's just, yeah. Anyway, that's going to be it for today's video. If you guys enjoyed, make sure to give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, follow us on all the social medias down below, and we'll see you in our next video.